So I'm Richard Taylor, and me and Dave Bagiant have been here in Peterborough watching a police and crime panel meeting. Dave's standing as the Labour candidate for Cambridge's Police and Crime Commissioner, and he's offered to speak to me. So, Dave, one of the first things that I want to know about how you're going to operate if you're the Police and Crime Commissioner is how would you take these strategic decisions at the top of the police force? Like our current Commissioner has got a business coordination board that meets in secret. Was that something you would carry on?
No, I think that for me, this panel serves a great purpose. And I think it's not a traditional council scrutiny panel. It doesn't have any teeth. It's very, very limited in what it can achieve. And I've been thinking over the months since I set out to win this post, that this panel has a much more important role. And I think on this panel, there's lay people and there's elected councillors who represent the broad view, elected view, of the whole of the area of Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. And I think that I will be asking them to bring things to me and we will be discussing them. I think the Commissioner is autonomous and can make decisions on their own. But I think this needs to be a much more advised position. I can understand why it's been different for the previous incumbent. He's a traditional Tory. He was not necessarily his choice.
Would you try and use the Police and Crime Panel as your board, essentially? Would you take decisions to them before you make them?
At this distance, and I can't say what's going to happen because there may be things that you have to immediately act to, and there's going to be a longer-term decision-making plan, which this panel will be much more involved in. When something quick time comes up, then it may have to be done solely by the Commissioner. It may have to be done in consultation with the chair of this panel. But I think that for the longer view on policing, my ideas on community policing, on the way that I want to take the police to the community, to work out what the vision is going to be and what my priorities are going to be, which then in turn become the police's priorities, this panel has got a very important part to play. So now, I don't want to stop them scrutinising, but I want to make them part of the process at the same time.
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? Because their role is scrutiny, but if you're involving them in making the decisions, how are they then going to scrutinise essentially their own decisions? It becomes pretty impossible, doesn't it?
No, it doesn't. It gives them a second bite. I mean, having them in consultation doesn't mean that they're making the decision. Okay. It means that they will be part of the decision-making process, right. And then I make the decision, and then it comes back for them to scrutinise. Okay, so that tells me how you'll run that. So there's something that concerns me is the openness of our criminal justice system in general. I've tried to find out what's going on in our local courts in Cambridge, and I've not been able to find out what's coming up. And is it something that you think, with the and crime element of the role, that you could open up our court system so that we can find out what people are being sentenced to, what people are in court for? I think that the liberalisation and the public face of justice and the public face of policing is very important. The police service is there to represent the public, and going right back to Peel, who said that the police officer was the citizen in uniform and policing is by consent, relies on that public face.
So when you say liberalisation, you mean openness? You don't becoming more liberal?
I mean more bit by me and more open, and more part of the public process.
So what do you see as the role of the police?
The police are there to prevent crime, I suppose, and to police things when they go wrong. That's quite an interesting question, actually.
I think it's an important basic question. The traditional answer 100 years or so ago would have been perhaps keep the peace. Yeah. But now we've got such a broader range of roles that we ask the police, which you alluded to then.
Yeah, there's certainly their main element in my mind is to keep society safe, and what they're not there is to interpret the law. They're there to uphold the law. And I think that is a very important role.
So if the focus is safety, then something like bank fraud, like if you went home and you discovered that you've got a bank statement and someone is taking money off your card, do you think that's a role for the police something the police should be investigating?
It's a role for the law to investigate. Now, whether that involves the police at this current time, the police have undertaken that role. Now, in the same way as Sir Graham Bright said today, it may not be the police officer's role to attend a road accident. Now that was a bit of a devastating statement, because I think that most people expect to see the police at a road accident. But I understand where he's coming from. I'm not saying I'm agreeing with him, but I understand where he's coming from. I think that the police have undertaken the role of dealing with fraud. It has become a policing matter. But whether in the future it will remain so, I don't know.
Well, I'd like your first answer, actually. You said it's focused on safety, and that's certainly my primary concern would be injuries and safety. So things like we heard missing persons, for example, that's a safety issue, but it's not all about crime. So can I ask you about surveillance? So today we've heard about AMPR. The Police and Crime Commission is putting more money into AMPR. We've got the Investigatory Powers Bill going through Parliament today. Do you think the police need to have a database of where we're all travelling and who we've all communicated with?
I think there's a mixed answer to that, and this is going to be a politician's answer. I'm sorry about that. I think that it's very useful if you're chasing criminals, but if you're turning people into criminals by that data, I don't think that's at all useful. For instance, when the police tried to put a surveillance team or use people to do surveillance with the students at Cambridge University, I thought that was appalling. I don't know whether that was something that the Cambridge Constabulary actually devised, or whether that came from a very much more secret organisation, maybe special branch, maybe even MI5. I find that really difficult, and I would not be supporting anything like that.
So do you think the police should have access to your internet history and your mobile phone records? Or what safeguards do you think should be in place before they can get hold of them?
I think they should need a search warrant to do that.
So the information should be collected, but we should have a search warrant and go through the courts?
Well, I mean, the information is collected, it's there forever, and it's not destroyed. So everything that I do on my mobile phone, everything I do on my internet is recorded somewhere. I don't think that's an automatic right to give that to the police service. And in the same way, if I'm behaving in a criminal way, then I should be expecting the police to come knocking on my door with a search warrant and want to see what's in there. I'm not here to protect criminals. Part of my role is to protect public freedom.
And what about things like, we've got bulk data sets in the Investigatory Powers Bill, things like who's attended a theatre performance, who's bought football tickets. Is that the kind of data that you as Police and Crime Commissioner would want the force to have access to? Again,
I think this is something that needs to be restricted. I don't think there should be an automatic right to get to this data.
So
there needs something. It is routinely collected. You mean if it's routinely
collected in a centralised manner?
Yeah, accessible to the police. No, I don't think it should be. But if they've got a specific read, if somebody gets murdered after a theatre performance or in a theatre, it's reasonable for them to come and get that data. But
there is a distinction between obtaining it from those who have got it for operational purposes, running the theatre performance, than the police holding it and having it accessible to.
I'm not comfortable with that.
So it sounds like that you would be voting against the Investigatory Powers Bill if you're in Parliament.
If I was in Parliament, but I'm not, which I might regret. But the point is that no, policing is not about a big brother effect, police or big sister. Policing is about policing by consent, and if the idea doesn't have the consent of the public, then it shouldn't really be being done.
So just on that point then, policing of 20 mile an hour in Cambridge, in many areas the majority of people are breaking the law there. Do you think that we should have enforcement of... So the policing by consent argument, do you think that does that risk policing by consent?
No, that doesn't. That's not a risk of policing by consent, because the majority of people represented by their representatives, the local council, agree that it's the right thing to do. That 20 mile an hour thing is people make a big issue about it. We heard today about a car driver blaming cyclists, and there is a difficult relationship. When people get in cars, they change personalities, they change their ideas, they become victims to things that they abhor when they're actually walking along the road as a pedestrian. So 20 mile an hour limit is not about policing by consent. That is the law. We have agreed that law, and that should be policed.
Do you think so you think enforcement of 20 mile an hour limits is a practical thing to do, as opposed to taking the view that really it should all be down to road environment and we should just naturally slow down the traffic?
I think that probably isn't very practical. It's about balancing resources.
Which will be your job as Police and Crime Commissioner.
I know, but my job as Police and Crime Commissioner will be to look at the case for the use of resources.
So would you...
Let me finish. it's important here. If 20 mile an hour was accepted and is accepted by the public, when I drive my car, which is not very often, I do 20 mile an hour in the limit, so everybody behind me does 20 mile an hour. I think it's something that will just become a norm. It's a change. Some people don't like it. Driving at more than 20 mile an hour in Cambridge is dangerous, end of story.
So if you were a Police and Crime Commissioner, you come to the East Area Committee as Police and Crime Commissioner, and
that'd be a thing,
the councillors there say, we want enforcement of the 20 mile an hour limits. Will you put it back to them and say, look, you really need to act to do more than just signs? Or will you say, I'm happy putting the manpower into that?
I think that we would look at, I will look at the 20 mile an hour limit alongside local opinion. And if there's a need to make it a priority for a short while, yes. Resources are tight. There's 1,000 police officers, probably only ever 300 of them on duty at any time. To say that you'd make it a priority every day of the week would be wrong. But to make it clear to the public that you are going to enforce that law, yes, I do think that's a good idea.
So I've asked you about the role of local councils in setting police priorities, and essentially you told me that I've got to wait till after the election to find out the details.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's a reasonable thing to say? Because surely we need to know what your policies are now so we can decide how to vote for you.
My policy, my number one policy, which hasn't got detail, but it's laid down what I'm going to be doing. My number one policy will be to set priorities based on what the public and the police agree. I've said all the way through, I will go to the communities with a superintendent. I will meet with the communities, and I will be in that room. The community will talk with the superintendent and they will talk about their concerns. Very much like the East Area Committee, if you like, but perhaps on a bigger scale and more thought through, because I want members of all the communities to be there. Those two groups, the police and the public, will set a priority.
So you're suggesting it'll be you will run the meeting perhaps rather than the local council?
I'll be at the meeting
so,
to make sure there's fair play.
But who will ultimately take the decision on what the local policing priorities are? Will it be you?
Yes.
It will be you.
It will come back to me.
It will not be the local council. So we will lose that local democratic input.
Well, no, you're not going to lose the input. You're going to lose.
We'll lose the decision making.
Well, you don't have this. I'm talking about real priorities, about things that people. I'm not saying that they're not at the local, but I'm talking about priorities that the public and the police sit down and work out. Not 20 people, but as many people as want to turn up. And it may take 3 meetings to get to a position where some priorities come forward that everybody is in agreement about. They would then become my priorities. So I'm not saying, I'm not going to give carte blanche here, but I can't see any reason why, having said everything I've just said now, that if they make a priority that I'm going to disagree with them.
Okay, that's clear how that might run then. So do you think Cambridgeshire is the right size for a police force, or should we have a police force for Cambridge or East of England, or even a national police force?
No,
do we need police forces?
I think that on paper, a national police service looks like a great idea. But I think that what that means is that areas get neglected. The rural communities say currently they don't see a police officer. Actually, you don't particularly see one in Cambridge either. But you might see one in Peterborough. Now, if it means, when you get a bigger region, that means your police service moves into what are seen as the high crime areas and the low crime areas get neglected. So I think there's probably an optimum size. And I think Cambridgeshire is successful. The police service are reasonably and relatively successful. I wouldn't see any reason to change that model.
So you said you might not see a police officer in Cambridge. What we will see is PCSOs. Would you keep PCSOs?
I think they're great.
Do you think that? So why do you think it's right to put the money into PCSOs when they don't have all the powers of a police constable? Do you think that that's a sensible way to put resources?
Yeah, I do. When I was lecturing on policing at Anglia Ruskin, on the degree that I wrote, which ironically I think has given me a lot of the background for this sort of position that I'm applying for, my idea of PCSOs, as they came out, I thought that was a great idea because it is the ultimate situation.
They're a Labour idea.
Well, that's right, but I mean, I'm not just because they were a Tony Blair idea. My thoughts on this is 15% of crime is solved by very clever detective work. The other 85% of solved crime comes from the public. The people tell the police officer. The police service is not hugely popular. So we need to break down that unpopularity. The PCSO is that linked person. They're not going to arrest anybody. They are the eyes and the ears and the friends of the public. And if you walk down Mill Road, the local police officer, PCSO there, talks to the people and they talk back to them.
So you think the value of the PCSO is perhaps in the fact they don't have the policing powers, so people are more comfortable talking to them?
That's right. And I think that would be the whole idea of my police liaison, whatever we would call that group that I would hold in the community.
Do you think people actually understand?
No, people would start to talk to the police service and realise that there is much to be gained by talking.
Do you think many people actually understand when they look at a PCSO that they're not a police constable? Do you think that?
Yeah, I think most people know that. Most people that live in the UK, if you were a foreign visitor, you might imagine that they are part of the arm of the state. But
something I've done a lot of is campaigning against the greater rollout of tasers. Would you like to see all frontline police in Cambridgeshire armed with tasers?
No. As a generalisation, no. If there was a certain set of circumstances where that might become necessary, then that might become necessary. But in the general way, the way that we police in this country, that is not a role I want.
You're roughly happy with the current situation where we have some specialist units and the armed officers have tasers. That's excellent.
Okay.
I think we're all there. So
I mucked up some bits in there. I hope you're not going to murder me.
No, I think we can pretty much use that straight on.
Yeah. Well, I'm quite happy with that.
Thanks.
And anything questions you got, let's not do it by tweet. Well, I'm here to represent people. That's my sole purpose for standing. My dad was a copper. I was a firefighter. I got a PhD in uniform service culture, so I understand the way that the police work in a way these people don't understand at all.
So I've just had a quick look at my notes. So on your office size, I think you've already made some comments. You have a smaller office than the current Police and Crime Commissioner. Would you keep the outreach officers?
I think that in the short term, yes. But my aim would be to be the outreach officer. Now, I'm not saying that you do away with the outreach officers. I think that right at this, taking over that office is going to be, there's going to be 100 days understanding what the job really is and how much support staff you need. My idea of an office, I mean, I can't see at the moment why I need an office. The staff will need an office. I've got a laptop, I will work from a laptop. Every police station has got places that I can use. There's plenty of community buildings. There's lots of places that a commissioner can work. I'm not going to be a 9-to-5 commissioner. I'm going to come on duty or whatever it is to do the work that I want to do with the community. I'm going to do that at the times when the community are around, and most of that is going to be in the evenings.
Have you ever committed a crime yourself?
Wow, there's a question, isn't it? I actually broke the law speeding once.
And got caught for it?
Yeah. Well, that was because I bought a new car and I lost. It was going a bit faster than I thought I should be.
And was that speed camera or was that pulled over?
That was a speed camera.
In Cambridge?
Yeah.
Which one?
I don't know. Oh, yeah, it was on Victoria Road. It's one of those secret ones, and I did the course, so I didn't get the police record for it.
Oh, so it wasn't the big yellow one on Victoria Road?
No.
It was
no.
a police one on Victoria.
Yeah. And actually, what's ironic about it is I don't speed. So it was just a new car, and I'd come off the motorway, and I hadn't adjusted my driving correctly, and so I got caught for it. And anything else? No, I haven't.
Excellent.
I actually haven't broken the law. I don't know.